When you're networking well, you're trying to find ways to provide value to other people first and foremost. You're not trying to sell stuff. Hopefully that comes, but a lot of the times when you're networking, you're really just trying to go out of your way to find ways to serve other people. And you can still do that both online and offline as well.
Hi, friends. In this special episode of Artisanal Insights, I sit down with Dave Delaney, author, chief communications strategist, and CEO of Futureforth.com, a Nashville-based communications consultancy. This interview was captured live at a recent Content Economy Nashville event, where Dave discusses his history of building tech and creative communities in Nashville, including PodCamp Nashville in 2008. He also shares insights on networking and building content for niche audiences, which includes his current podcast, Wise Squirrels, focused on adults with ADHD. There are so many insights in this conversation, so let's dive right in. Dave Delaney, welcome to Artisanal Insights.
Hi, Carla.
Long time no see.
I know. Yes, it's great to be here.
Great to be here. Okay, so we are here at the first Content Economy Nashville event, which we've been billing as the third generation of content community-driven events here in Middle Tennessee. And so since we're kind of now the podcast of record for the Craft Content Nashville Collective, I need to take you back in time to Cannery Ballroom, February 2008. For those of you who may not be familiar, what was PodCamp and why did you help bring one to Nashville?
Yeah. Wow. It's a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. So Marcus Whitney and I co-founded a tech unconference called BarCamp Nashville. And when we did that, was anybody at BarCamp? The first one? Okay, cool. Awesome. So BarCamp Nashville was in August of 2007. And BarCamp was an unconference for technology professionals of all different stripes and sizes and so forth. But BarCamp was more of a dev event than the content side of things. And PodCamp, which was originated in Boston by friends Chris Penn and Chris Brogan. And so PodCamp was built off of BarCamp as a similar sort of community-driven volunteer event that was completely free for anybody to attend. And so when Marcus pitched me on the idea of doing BarCamp, I was like, yeah, sure. I still had that Canadian smell. I was so new to Nashville, like very, very early on. And so we agreed to do BarCamp, and it was a huge success. It was at the Exit Inn. So we decided to do PodCamp next. And so, yeah, it came because of those early days of just kind of putting things together organically and seeing if people would show up, and they showed up.
What were those early days like as you were trying to build a community? Because we've talked a lot about it's tough to build an audience. Back then, that was the beginning of social media. Like, how did you build that audience from the early days?
Yeah, so in the early days, part of what happened was after BarCamp, you know, when you organize an event, a big event, there's like a high that happens. And then after that, or attend one even, afterwards, you're kind of like, it's over. It's like summer camp. It's like, man, I don't want it to end. And because we sort of split PodCamp and BarCamp sort of 6 months or so apart, I wanted a way to keep people together. So I started something called Geek Breakfast. And Geek Breakfast was basically, some of you were there, I would do a Geek Breakfast once a month, and people would come and have breakfast and we'd hang out. And so that was one of the things I did to try to keep people together. What happened was somebody from out of town came and he said, how do I create a Geek Breakfast in Chicago? And I was like, just invite your geeky friends for breakfast. Like, it's that easy. And he's like, yeah, but do you have a wiki for that? Yeah, it used to be wikis. Some of you know what I'm talking about. I was like, do you really need that? And so I created a wiki for Geek Breakfast as basically a way to like create your own Geek Breakfast. And then that evolved into a website. And then suddenly all these Geek Breakfasts were popping up across the country, in Canada, in Australia, South Africa. it was wild to see this thing spreading from Nashville. So that was a big way of bringing people together. And also just, it was organically made in the sense that like people could come, anybody could be involved and help out and build a conference or unconference. And so that's exactly what happened. Like people would come, we'd have meetups a lot of the time. So people could come and attend and hang out and get to know one another. And yeah, it came from that.
Yeah. So word of mouth was still a thing. And
yeah, word of mouth was a big part of it. Also, it was early days. So like I started on Twitter in February 2007 and started podcasting in 2005. Yeah. So, but Twitter was definitely a great way for early adopters to kind of communicate with one another. And that was definitely one of the channels that we would use to kind of rally the troops and bring people together.
Yeah. So you wrote a book about networking and built kind of off of some of those experiences that you're just talking about. And so now here we are, and we're at this live event trying to encourage the community to come back together and talk in person, right? People in real life. That book's been out for what, almost a decade now at this point? Yeah, almost a decade. Yeah. So how would you update, post-pandemic, all the, what are your words of advice for networking now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the book itself, I wrote it as a way to kind of share my story of coming from Toronto to Nashville. It includes the story of bar camp and pod camp and things, but also, there's plenty of other examples and case studies and stuff. And so the idea of the book was to write about offline and online ways to build community and network in the way that you don't need to shower after and feel gross. Because networking can have negative connotations. If anything, I probably shouldn't have used the word networking, but I networked my way into a book deal with my publisher by literally practicing what I preach and talking to strangers. And I went over, she was at a conference, she was behind a table with books on display, and I knew some of the authors. So I just went over and introduced myself and just started chatting with no intention to pitch her on a book. My wife hears all the insane ideas that I have. And I never even told her that I'd had this idea. And the woman, Catherine Bull, was great. And she kind of got the idea out of me. And next thing I knew, I had a book deal and an advance and a contract. And I was like, oh my God, I got to write a book. Yeah. As far as things, so I have chapters on Facebook and Twitter and all these things. But then I also have chapters on organizing your own events or how to attend events or how to follow up and business card etiquette and all that stuff. I guess as far as when you're networking well, you're trying to find ways to provide value to other people first and foremost. You're not trying to sell stuff. Hopefully that comes. But a lot of the times when you're networking, you're really looking for ways to help other people and then help them. And it's basically, call it karma, whatever you want, planting seeds. But you're really just trying to go out of your way to find ways to serve other people. And you can do that both online and offline. And you can still do that both online and offline as well.
Yeah. I'm going to pivot just a little bit here, although it is funny that my origin story in Nashville was I moved to Nashville and walked into my first PodCamp Nashville event in 2011, having been part of the PodCamp community in Pittsburgh. And the first person I met was Dave Delaney. And now here, I literally walked through the door of Cadillac Ranch. Remember that? Walked through the door of Cadillac Ranch, didn't know anybody at the time, and literally the first person who walks up to the door and sticks his hand out and says, "Hi, welcome, I'm Dave Delaney." And that's, here we are 13 years later at our third generation of events. So talking to strangers works.
Talking to strangers, except on Broadway nowadays. I wouldn't talk to strangers on
that's a good point.
Broadway.
So let's talk a little bit about the topic that we've been focusing on today, which is this idea of niche audiences. And you have, I think, one of the most creative niche audiences that you're going after right now. Yeah. Would you talk a little bit about Wise Squirrels and how that came to be and who is it for?
Yeah, thank you. Yes. I started a podcast last year called Wise Squirrels. It's probably my 7th podcast in almost 20 years of podcasting. The podcast is about being a late diagnosed adult with ADHD, which I was diagnosed last year, just before my 51st birthday. So I was diagnosed last year and I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And I've learned a bit since then, a lot. And so the Wise Squirrels name came because, wise as in wisdom that we've earned through unknowingly developing our own coping mechanisms and ways to kind of deal with ADHD unknowingly because I didn't know I had ADHD. And so wise from that wisdom that earned in, adults in that case. And then squirrel because squirrel, right?
Right.
So wise squirrels. And then it's definitely the most successful podcast I've ever had after my first podcast, which was Two Boobs and a Baby. My wife and I being the boobs, about parenting. And so, and that was back 2005 to 2008. So it's been great. I mean, it's amazing because I'm talking to subject matter experts on ADHD. So, physicians and psychologists, psychiatrists, ADHD coaches, but also high achievers. So for example, like I spoke to Dr. Bob Dempsey, who was the International Space Station director for NASA for 16 years. And he was diagnosed with ADHD at 60 and now works for Blue Origin. So, some pretty cool, great guests. But what's really nice is I've been getting all these wonderful emails and messages and reviews about the podcast from fellow wise squirrels. So,
how are you reaching that audience? Are they finding you, or are you going out and trying to find other communities that already exist? How does that work?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, because one of the most frustrating things with podcasting is, talking and not knowing if anybody's actually listening. I mean,
right.
you have download, statistics and things depending on the platform or streaming statistics, but at the same time, you don't really know unless people, this is partly what about like leaving reviews. Like podcasters and content creators want reviews, not just because it helps the algorithms, share their stuff with more people when they're searching for whatever that subject matter is. But it also it's not even so much just an ego thing. It's more just like, people like me. They really like me, which is great. And maybe some don't. And that's cool too. Luckily, they like me so far. So that's the reviews and people finding the show kind of organically. I haven't done any advertising for the podcast. I've just done a lot of networking with ADHD professionals and high achievers with ADHD, and just been telling people about the podcast. Now, I was a speaker for Google for about 6 years, and I do a lot of presentations, public speaking. I work with companies and help them improve their communication skills. And my business is Futureforth. And I mentioned that not to shamelessly plug it, although futureforth.com. No, but I mentioned that because I know a thing or two about SEO, search engine optimization and search engine marketing and content, because I'm a nerd. I've been online since, running a BBS on my Commodore 64, my second computer. So here's the point. From an SEO perspective, I started Wise Squirrels, and then I realized, oh, wait, if I change the name to ADHD Wise Squirrels, just like Acme Plumbing, not so much about the alphabetical aspects, of course, but, now when somebody searches for podcasts, it's ADHD Wise Squirrels, the podcast for late diagnosed adults with ADHD. And that's exactly what I am. And that's who I'm trying to reach. So that helped.
Did you imagine when you started the podcast that this would become, we talked a couple months ago and you said this was your most successful podcast. You've had a lot of really great podcasts over the past, almost 20 years now. Could you have imagined when you started this as just kind of it was a personal project really to kind of to work through that. And now it's big.
Yeah. So and no, I didn't expect it. What I have found is this little passion project of mine I edit my own show. You probably tell, but I'm an old school podcaster, so I love just the whole creation of it. I also love editing it. We're always trying to find hacks and ways to save time and things. And absolutely, I'm all for that. But for me, I'm speaking to experts because I want to learn about it. And so what I do is when I edit the show, I'm re-listening to the episode again and again as I'm editing. So I'm hearing this information again, and that helps me retain that information because I am doing the show to learn, but to also share with the audience. So this little passion project then sort of shifted into a bit of a mission after I learned that with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD, your life expectancy can be up to 13 years less.
Wow.
And when I learned that, I was like, oh, interesting. And so I developed a new presentation that I do called The Root Down, which I've done here at the EC. And it's my next book that I'm working on now as well, which is really, it's a process to know yourself, respect yourself, and connect yourself. And so the idea is, without getting into the weeds on it, but I have strategies and stories about how to better understand yourself and know yourself, your strengths and so on, how to love yourself, accept yourself, and respect yourself. And then I have strategies for that. And then finally connecting yourself, which gets back to like the idea of doing in-person events and things, because finding community is what it's all about. I mean, regardless of your neurotype, you feel lonely. Most people do. It's an epidemic. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy has talked at length and written a great book about loneliness, and not just in the U.S. but around the world. And it's a detrimental thing. It's the equivalent of like feeling loneliness constantly has the same adverse health effects as smoking 16 cigarettes a day. I think it's 16 or 10 or something. But regardless, you get the idea there. Part of my goal of that presentation and that book is to help people, regardless of their neurotype, to kind of answer those three sections. And the thread line within the presentation is about my ADHD and learning about ADHD, in part also to educate audiences about it, because if you've heard, we're all a little ADHD sometimes. I forgot my keys. That's not highly inaccurate, right? Like, you don't just have ADHD sometimes. You either do or you don't. It's a neurotype. So
I'm sure you had to learn a lot
to
be able to do this. Like, how did you go through that process? Did you do it all through the podcast?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about my learning so much about it is, one of the fun things about ADHD is hyperfocus. By doing the podcast and starting to write about ADHD, when I created the website, which was like done over a weekend, I just jumped right into it.
Yeah.
And of course, with therapy and an ADHD coach, that's also helped me. And I read like several books about it as well, and then reached out to those authors and talked to them on the podcast. And I just decided like I want to learn as much as I can. And
I'm curious about this because, I teach social media, right?
Yeah.
And we talk a lot right now in particular about the focus on accessibility,
yes.
right? And how do we make our content more accessible? And I'll be honest, ADHD is a blind spot for me, right? So like, how can we as content creators better produce, as someone who's living with ADHD, how can we create content that might better resonate with somebody who has a shorter attention span?
Well, it's a great question. And it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart as an early adopter on social media and all the things, because, as we've joked around a little bit about kind of the state of Twitter and so forth, or whatever they call it now, the microblogging site that will not be named. These technologies are created to be addictive. And those with ADHD, especially undiagnosed and untreated, are prone to addiction. We lack dopamine. It's also why I'm so good and love standing on stages talking to audiences, because I get this rush of dopamine when I get laughter or heads nodding or whatever, and people talking to me. I get this rush of dopamine and I'm like, I love it, right? But I say that because that with lacking in dopamine, you can easily become susceptible to addiction of, alcohol, drugs, whatever. Overeating is another one. And so that's dangerous. So with technology, you have to be mindful. And I've always been very aware, like both my kids are late teens now, and they know, like they both are on smartphones. They both have iPhones. They're both on TikTok and so forth. But these things are designed to be addictive. And so there are ways to curb that. And again, this is stuff that anybody can use, anybody can do. And I encourage them to do it. Like things like blocking sleeping without your phone in your room, or changing it to grayscale, or turning off the notifications, or using apps that will limit the amount of access you have. I use an app I like a lot called Freedom, which is like a VPN basically that blocks access to sites during periods of the day. So all this stuff, as I said, these both devices and the apps are designed to be addictive. And so to answer your question, I think I don't know what you could do for folks rather than just understand that. And again, I'm not a doctor, and nor do I play one on the internet.
Right.
So I always do have to point that out. But yeah, those are the main things I would say, is just to keep in mind that these technologies are addictive. And if it feels icky with something that you're doing online, like trying to trick people or talking about 8 figures, then don't do it. Like, if it feels gross, don't do it.
Good advice for anybody there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you go from here? Obviously, you just mentioned, is that news? Are we breaking news here that you're writing a book about 8 wise squirrels? Is that?
Well, yeah, I've alluded to it, but I haven't really talked about it much. But yeah. That's what it is. It's probably breaking news. Yeah,
So,
breaking news.
Breaking news. Dave is writing another book. Where do you see it going from here? Is this something that you're going to keep trying to build and grow and expand, or is this kind of stay as something that you're just really passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I'm at the age now where I have not one, but 2 college tuitions to help figure out.
Right.
So that's, you get to this point where you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to need to make a lot more money. And so, I am like, I've had a great advertiser on the podcast, and I am seeking other sponsors and advertisers on it. But yeah, no, I do have some ideas on where I want to take things that I'm kind of working towards. So, but futurefourth.com is like my main business. And that's certainly where I spend the bulk of my time. And it's oftentimes too, like, we're easily distracted. So like I get an idea and I'm like, why squirrels? I got to go do this. And I'm like, no, stop. This is still kind of hobby mode. So, which is why I do a new episode every 2 weeks instead of every week. And so as far as like, also advice for content creators is don't, if you're creating content, like plan accordingly and understand that if you're going to do like a weekly or God forbid a daily podcast, you're going to have to do a daily podcast because the more you fall off that schedule, the more you disappoint your listeners. And also, in podcast land, we call it pod fading, right? Where you, as you know, right? Like where you gradually, and this is what's happened to most of my podcasts in the past, where you start to run out of steam and then you just don't do anymore. So that's why I intentionally paced it out, one every 2 weeks. So, yeah.
That's
but I have some ideas.
That's a good idea. What other, maybe 1 or 2 of your best tips or tricks to content creators today to communicate more effectively, or what can we be doing better when it comes to creating content?
I'm a little jaded with the state of things these days as far as it pertains to social media and social networks. I mean, we're kind of really slaves to the algorithms at the end of the day. If you're trying to, have a business online, or you're trying to, gain followers or whatever your, ego metrics, vanity metrics you're trying to achieve. As far as like tips go, I think it gets down to like knowing your audience and trying to, following the niche theme or niche.
You had to be here, folks. Sorry.
I'm Canadian, so, I can't help it. I'm Canarican now. So
you are an American citizen.
I am an American citizen. Yes. Last year, I finally became an American citizen. So yeah. So I can vote now. So watch out. So yeah.
Okay. You want to switch gears?
Sure.
And take the Artisanal Insights questionnaire?
Yes.
Are you ready? Okay.
Yes.
First question. Who is a local creator or creative that we should all be following?
Carla Swank Fox. Carla, honestly, but Carla is, I started some of this stuff, but like Carla has been instrumental. Her and Chuck Bryant and others have been instrumental in keeping the momentum over the years. And so, yeah, I definitely encourage people to follow what you're doing.
Well, it's very kind of you. But also, yes, I would like to get on the record a thank you to Chuck, who's been by my side through all this craziness for the last several years. And also not here today because she's stuck in Rome.
Bummer.
I know, her flight got canceled and she didn't make it back. But Jessica Grande is our director of marketing now, and she just absolutely rocked getting all this stuff ready. Second question, what is a hidden gem in Nashville or Middle Tennessee that we as locals tend to take for granted?
That's a great question. So I have this whole theory that like if we can somehow find a way to just pick up Roberts off Lower Broadway and move it to like anywhere else in the city, that would be really great. So if I'm entertaining visitors, Yeah, I definitely go to Roberts down on Lower Broad. I had I had somebody I met recently who's new to Nashville, and she said we were meeting actually right by here, and she said, "Aren't we near Honky Tonk Highway?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Honky Tonk Highway, where the honky tonks are." And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "You just moved here, so don't ever say that again." Other things, I mean, there's always like Musicians Corner is amazing in Centennial Park.
Yeah.
They do great stuff. It's free, it's free, and it's happening in the fall and the summer. So that's a great way to get out with your family or on your own even and go check out music. I got together with Bob Bernstein recently, Bongo Bob, who started Bongo, Java, and Fido, and other great businesses. And we caught up after a long time. And I was, we were kind of reflecting on I've been in Nashville 16 years, so long enough to be like old,
Right.
Have seen a lot in this town. And yeah, I think a lot of the places that attracted me to choose Nashville as a place to live, they're still around. A lot of them are, not all of them, but things like Fido in Hillsborough Village, a great coffee shop. Grimey's, which was in a little house in Berry Hill when I moved here.
Yep.
There's something else Belcourt. Like I'm a movie nerd and I love Belcourt. So great theater. So yeah.
Awesome. Speaking of Fido, what's your favorite coffee order in Nashville?
Depends when you're asking me. So my favorite coffee order in Nashville currently is black. My wife and I did the Whole30 diet years ago.
Yeah.
And you cut out kind of everything and then you gradually kind of reintroduce stuff. And I discovered, I don't mind coffee black because you have to drink it black to do that thing. And so I stuck with it and I was like, yeah, black coffee. Yeah, it's actually pretty good. I don't need all the cream and sugar. And I just saw something about like the Dunkin' Donuts like latte thing, whatever seasonal thing is the equivalent. The sugar in it is the equivalent to 12 donuts. And that was a good, reminder. I mentioned the timing because my home and native land has a little coffee chain called Tim Hortons, which will be opening.
They're opening here.
They're opening their first location and multiple locations here. So in Canada, we order double doubles, and it's like double is a word where you get 2 sugars and 2 creams. And that's in the Canadian dictionary and will soon be in the American dictionary too. Timmy's a double as well.
I'm a northern girl as well. I'm with you on the Timmy's thing. It's a thing. I know we just social media is kind of a dumpster fire, but where can people follow you?
Yeah, so you can follow me at Dave Delaney everywhere. DaveDelaney.me is my website, which you could also find futureforth.com. And I encourage you to check out wisesquirrels.com. There is an ADHD. It's a free ADHD assessment on the website. It's a good starting point to see if you may or may not have ADHD. I don't see the results, just to be super clear on that, but it's just a resource that you can take a test and just see. But most importantly, if you feel that you might have ADHD, talk to your doctor. And I will also add that don't take just the test results, any online test result as that's the thing, but it's a good starting point, but talk to your doctor. But I'll also add a point that when you're talking to your doctor, ask them, what their opinion is about ADD or ADHD, which is the same thing, by the way. It's just a new name. Because some quacks are still out there. I mean, there's always some, right, that are like, what? So there are quacks out there who don't believe in ADHD or something like that. And so if your doctor says that, it's a good sign to go find another doctor.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Carla.
Thanks for listening. Get involved and stay connected with our creative community at craftcontentnashville.org. You can join our conversations on Instagram, Threads, and LinkedIn. And if you enjoyed this content, please subscribe or follow, rate and review, and of course, share Artisanal Insights wherever you get your audio content. Now go forth and craft content. We'll talk with you again soon.